Good morning, everyone. Brooke Chanfiki here again with, look who I found.
I know.
Allie, for real. For real. I just happened to be passing through Rochester, New York, and here I am with Allie. As always, welcome to CRE Conversations for All by LegaSHE. We're here to educate you on the amazing world, niche world of commercial real estate, specifically commercial real estate finance. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about first mortgage lending. And Allie here, who is an expert, as you all know from our last conversation, in this space, Allie is going to help us as we define CRE asset classes, CRE asset stages, right? So how does a building get born? How do we birth a building? And then we're also going to talk about some commercial real estate credit considerations or lending considerations. You're going to hear us interchangeably use credit and lending. We today are talking about the first mortgage space, right? So we're going to start with taking a mortgage or deed of trust in certain jurisdictions, and we're going to help to educate you. This is a primer, everyone who's on the line. This is a primer, so it's not meant for those individuals who are complete experts who've been doing this for 30 years, but you're welcome to join us because we're going to have a fun conversation regardless. So please listen in.
And add something if you'd like.
Yes, you can comment as we go. I'll be checking the comments. So as always, the fabulous Allie Sachs, you've seen her before. She's been with me once before. We're going to talk a little bit about this space to start. So Allie, take it away.
This space, yeah. So we're actually in High Falls in Rochester. My mom has been a woman-owned business since the 90s, even before probably. And so she bought this building in 1999. And this is where she had her, her business, still does. And they recently converted it to be their primary residence. So I grew up about 45 minutes from Rochester, 35. And so for them going back and forth, from to and from, we just got a little much. So they decided to move full-time downtown.
And you can see the old Kodak sign.
Yeah.
Like not that far away. Maybe we'll take some pictures.
Yes, we should. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
It was like 1900, this building was. It was manufacturing. So it's really an adaptive reuse space. And yeah, you'll see, if you walked in here, without any of the furniture, it would be completely just brick walls and a floor, and open ceiling. So what they did is they tried to create spaces within this larger space. So they had to get creative with that. But, I think that they really enjoy living downtown. They don't have a yard.
You don't have to clean up.
And they have parking. So, that's huge. Yeah. So it's a really cool space. I'm so happy that you were able to join here.
Thank you for hosting me here. And again, you are the driver. I am the passenger. Allie, you're the professor. I'm the student today. So we're going to dive right. You're in charge. So we're going to dive right in.
Get me started.
We're going to dive right in. We're going to have fun on this call. We're going to dive right into asset classes. So as we go, we're going to define things. I think this is really important for the listener to understand that we'll get going, we'll start talking, and we'll start using terminology. This happens all the time in commercial real estate.
Yeah.
When I was new to the industry, it drove me crazy because at the very beginning, when you walk into the room, you don't have the context in commercial real estate. You don't understand what that term means. And so you begin to shut down. Most of us will hear things and we'll say, don't understand this, turn off. We're going to ask you to be really open-minded, take notes as you go. Don't worry about asking a question or throwing something in the comments. If we get to it, we'll get to it. But the goal is for us to define and to make it really accessible for you, as opposed to making it, this very scary, what is commercial real estate finance? What does capital mean? That's what we're aiming to do. So we're going to start with commercial real estate asset classes. So do you want to start by defining what an asset class is, and then we'll walk through the major ones?
Yeah. So it's just kind of the categories that you would put a building into. So what purpose does it serve? What does it look like? Who are the tenants? What is it used for in the community? So, I think the main one everyone thinks of first, especially nowadays, and happy Fed Day, by the way.
Happy
we
Fed
didn't
Day,
even
everyone.
say that. I'm so sorry. Happy Fed Day.
Someone's going to be offended. We didn't say that.
I know. Thank you, Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Chairman Powell.
So, right back on track here.
Yeah.
Office, right? So when you hear, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to state the major categories, these asset classes for commercial real estate. So generally you're going to hear office, you got retail, you got industrial, multifamily, I would say flex kind of space, hospitality, and then kind of the specialties. So I would say when you're talking about office, right, you're going to have the main three subcategories of office that are going to be Class A, Class B, Class C. So Class A, as the name suggests, is the premier office space sub-asset class. And they generally exist in, in downtown. They exist really anywhere in suburban and urban markets. I think that the Class A has gotten a lot of attention because Class A generally is higher quality finishes, lots of amenities.
Maybe newer. It may be a
newer building. It's pretty fancy, I would say.
And you would say it's gotten a lot of attention because post-COVID.
Yes, that's where I was going with
tenants
that. Yeah, tenants began to care. Okay, is this space going to be better than my house? And I think that there are ways in which a new building that maybe doesn't have as many internal amenities can still be, a top tier Class A because of the streetscape. What are you offering the employees outside of just their cube or their office? So, but definitely newer buildings. Class B is kind of what it suggests, and Class B is also what it suggests. So
A being the best and C being the worst. And typically the appraisal community is really tied in to how the buildings are defined. Classes.
Right. So if you have a Class A office building, you're going to expect to pay higher rent. That's about it. That's the correlation, right?
Yeah.
Is that, but generally, these are places where people are going to be gathering.
Yes.
So, if you want that, your employees to be there, then, I think that that's something that people are really concentrating on. And there's some real look into what can you do with a Class B,
Yes.
Maybe it's a little bit less expensive nowadays, but what can you do to transform that? So yes, new construction, but also kind of this renovation or re-envisioning of it.
And we'll always say here that we're agnostic and we don't judge. So there are going to be folks who own Class C office buildings, and that is their space. That's their niche. That is what they've always done.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with
bread and butter.
That'd be bread and butter. Nothing wrong with that. So we want to make sure that people don't say Class A is the best, and I should only ever think about Class A, because there's a purpose for all of the different classes. And then as a building ages and potentially becomes what we call functionally obsolete, there's different categories of obsolescence. And if something becomes functionally obsolete, meaning it was an office that was built for a very specific time and it no longer works in the way it was intended 50 years ago, 70 years ago, then those buildings tend to be the types of buildings that folks will look at like this building that we're sitting in and say, what else can I do with this?
It was office, actually. This was office. So, it was retail, it was office, it was residential. So there's a lot you can do with a building like this. So, and then I would say, within those Class A, B, and C, okay, what purpose does it serve and where is it? So, you might hear the acronym CBD. A CBD Class A building is generally in a building that's more high-rise in a central business district. And then you hear suburban. suburban class A, B, and C is,
Mhm.
you know, what the name suggests. Usually they're generally existing in office parks where there's multiple buildings in a, you know, larger plot of land, I would say. You get medical office.
Mhm.
You know, that serves a specific purpose because you know that they generally look similar inside.
Yes.
And then, you know, the flex space. So that's, you know, could it be converted if it's office now, but does it have like a dock in the back that you could kind of convert that into more an industrial space? So yeah, did I cover it?
Yeah, you
I think
did it.
so,
Good
right?
job. Great
Yeah.
job.
Thank you.
Professor Allie. Allie's doing a
Right.
great
Remember
job.
I said professor, I'm scared to be a teacher. So this I was more nervous for than
They're going to work.
yeah, exactly. So all right. So then we get retail. This is I think retail is fascinating because not only does it, you know, I guess I don't know what said we should have listened to it right before this, but we'll get that on repeat. You know, what are consumer behaviors? You know, so you're going to go into a store to purchase something, right? So that's what retail suggests is it's the goods and services asset class. And so are you going to be going into a strip center? All right. Or are you going to be going into a mall? Or are you going to be going into a space that has all of those things? Right. So I would say that there are 3 main subtypes of retail. You got the shopping malls, the strip, you know, which is generally open. You might hear open air retail. That's another term that
which
is
becoming
really
very popular.
Exactly. And that's generally like a row of stores. You know, you could also get dining, entertainment, you know, sometimes even residential space above it. And then you get more of the neighborhood retail, which is generally anchored by a grocery store, CVS. You get the things that you need to do on your daily life to manage your house.
Ask you a controversial question, and this is for because
Yeah.
people read the headlines, right?
Okay.
So anyone who's here who's relatively new to commercial real estate, not residential real estate, but commercial real estate, you read these headlines that retail is dead.
Oh, the retail apocalypse.
Retail apocalypse. Everyone is only buying things on Amazon forever and ever from this point forward, and retail will die. And the more anxious folks are about this, the more they actually believe that no one will walk into a store again. Allie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I thought I was never going to walk into a store again because I didn't want to be sneezed on.
Yes.
However, I think that I think that's an overreaction. We talked about cycles, right?
Yes.
So the retail cycle, I think, is really fascinating. And when they're on the downturn and nobody really wants to finance a retail place because they're like, oh, retail apocalypse, no one's going to want to go there, right? You know, I just feel like that just lowers the supply. And now there's no new retail being built. And maybe they're reusing whatever existing retail. I think that's kind of why we went to that open air move from there, which is really, you know, people liked that during COVID too, to not be inside somewhere where, but I just, you know, I think that people missed people
being with people,
being
around people,
you know,
and there's always, and I think this is
I
really
want to try it on too now,
I
you know,
do like to try things
and
on.
2 days. Sorry, now shopping. I'm on a rant here. Get me talking about shopping, but sometimes I don't want to wait and then I don't want to return it. I don't want to have to go. Then I have to go into a place to return it generally, right? And I'm like, do I email? There's too many instructions. And then I end up just keeping it, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I could have, and I think, you know, supporting local. That's also been something that generationally, and I love, you know, I'm an older millennial, but that's Gen Z. I also just really appreciate the focus and attention on what's going on in your community. So, and I think that supporting local is important. So now when I think, oh, I need this, I'm thinking about where am I going to go? Where can I walk into? You know, so
and also there's always room, and we shouldn't forget this. There's always something that you need. You always need it.
Yeah.
last minute, right? So if you want to think about retail as sort of that last minute spot where I need to buy X right now. If that didn't exist, like I want people to play through the apocalyptic space where suddenly there are no stores. So first and foremost, if on the first floor, if you're walking down a street and on the first floor there's nothing, it's desolate, it feels, from an urban standpoint, it feels very uncomfortable, right? Because you want to see that life in those first floors. You're always going to want a little cup of coffee, or sometimes you need to pick up Band-Aids because you need them desperately right there. So there's all of these needs that you, as much as it would be lovely to have something door dashed in New York, we have DoorDash everywhere. Oh, I can get this in 3 minutes. Sometimes you just want to leave your house and go over there and walk into a space and feel life. And on our last call, we talked about how commercial real estate is community real estate. That's where the people mix and mingle. Residential is where you hang out in your house. So there is a space and always a need for the life on the street to be there. And that's what retail really represents. So I don't think it ever goes away, because for as long as we've been transacting, human beings have been trading, there have been marketplaces. I don't see us not having that.
Right.
We like this, right? The negotiating and the in-person trading with one another. That feels more human nature to me. So anyone who wants to fight us on retail disappearing, we're going to cite cycles. We're going to say marketplaces have been around since the dawn of time. They'll just have different iterations. They'll look differently. And so if you have a commercial real estate mindset, you're going to say, well, how does this space get repurposed if it no longer is going to work as a giant department store? It can work as something else.
Well, there's examples of that, very strong examples of that. And, everyone, if you're listening from Rochester, know, Marketplace Mall. And, that was the mall I went to growing up, that in Irondequoit, because Eastview was too far away from where I grew up. So, and now, it looks different, right? There, U of R has an incredible, orthopedic center there. I mean, now I took my dad there the other day, and then I was like, ooh, what's this? Maybe I'll go shopping while I wait for him, or, so anyways.
So it's about being open-minded.
Totally.
Let's be open. So Allie and I are going to preach, just because something was once one way. Doesn't mean that it should always be that way. Commercial real estate is constantly evolving. So you're not going to hear us say, oh, the mall disappeared. You're going to hear us say, what can happen to the mall? What might we do with the mall? That's the brainstorming and sort of the open-mindedness that we think of commercial real estate with.
Yeah. And I think that is to be celebrated, just because something is, half vacant right now doesn't mean that there isn't a plan for it. And maybe it's purposefully that way because things need to, happen. There's a lot that goes into planning and the pre-development, which we can get into. So, all right,
let's move to our
all right. So do we want to go real quick? I just want to mention, industrial Manufacturing, warehouse, you could think of cold storage there too. These are, I think a lot of what's happening now is that we want that the flexibility of how you're going to use that is important. And I think, also there are sub assets within that as well. For example, I've been hearing that there's a really great need for, 10, 15,000 square feet of industrial warehouse space, not 100,000, and if you get 100,000 square feet, it's generally for one big, tenant, I don't know what, Amazon or T-Mobile, whatever, whoever's going to go in there. So some of these other spaces where, maybe there's a branch here in Rochester, so they don't need a big space. They need, to do detailing or something on cars. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, but you don't need that big space. So, and then I want multifamily. We talked about the bigger, badder, older brother of residential. So, multifamily is residential properties with multiple units. So you think apartment buildings, condos, townhomes. These are like communities, I would say.
And I think so I just want to pick up one thing on the residential and then commercial. So I want everyone to think about those two spaces as similar but different, right? Just, cousins from different families. So your residential real estate is what most of us think of whenever someone says real estate. you just think of your house, because that's what we're really familiar with, is our home. But many humans in the United States, many of us live in multifamily properties. They're of all different grades. They're of all different vintages or ages. Some are rental, some are ownership, right? Condo ownership. So you have these, I want everyone to be really open-minded to when we talk about multifamily, which is very big today, right? Post-COVID, that multifamily market really did take off within COVID and post-COVID. It really took off in terms of development because there aren't enough housing units for all of us in the US. We have,
and financing them is really expensive.
It's very, very expensive to do. So it's an amazing asset class and a really important asset class, which is big. Even though in your mind you might say, but I live in a home. Well, who lives in apartments? It's really an important conversation we need to have.
And I would say for an investor, multifamily, these larger communities, I mean, they're, stable cash flow, long-term life of the asset. So, when we get into the financing part of it, I mean, that is going to be something that you're going to have for, the useful life of the asset is a lot longer. So, and then, you get low rise, mid rise, high rise. And then, there's even underneath that, you get student housing, you even affordable properties, which I, almost want to say that's specialty, but it's multifamily as well. And then, age restricted. We're not going to talk about any senior living or anything like that. Arguably, that's a little bit more operating because there's usually an entity that is operating that facility. And then you get student housing is a little bit similar. So anyways, we get hospitality here, which hotels, motels, resorts, those are the performance of those are more based on the room, right? So what's the rate at which you're renting the room and how much revenue does that generate based on the occupancy?
The best analogy that I've ever been able to come up with, I'm probably stealing this from someone, I don't know if it was mine originally, is that hospitality hotels are the closest thing to an operating business that you could have in real estate, because you have to release the room every single night. So instead of talking about leases, they talk about ADRs, average daily rates, and RevPARs, revenue per unit. So you have a very different mindset when you operate in the hospitality space that some individuals in commercial real estate will say, even though it's commercial real estate, it kind of looks more like a business.
Oh, it's totally a constant discussion. And
different organizations, as an aside, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but different organizations will actually capture it differently. In some banks, credit unions, finance companies, you'll find the hospitality linked together with commercial real estate and work, with the leasing groups groups that underwrite stabilized cash flows. And in some organizations, you'll find it in the business group.
So, and really you can Google even just, commercial real estate asset types, and you can get so much more detailed on this, but, I'm just going to move on to the mixed use is what it, really what it says. I mean, it's basically like, how is the property utilized for two or more of the asset classes that we just discussed? A combination, as it would suggest. And then you get the specialty, which is, the self-storage, parking garages. I want to think of commercial real estate as income producing vehicles. So anything that you can think of that you're paying to use, so.
Although, and this is really interesting because land, and we didn't really go into this here. We didn't go into it, but I'm going to add it because we're about to shift from classes into stages. And there is a whole marketplace around land, right? Buying and selling land, even if there's no cash flow, right? So when we think of commercial real estate, I think what we want to say is there's the potential for there to be a lease.
Future income.
Future
Really?
income, even if there's no income today, it's just
Yep.
a raw
Future.
lot that has nothing on it but, tumbleweeds floating by.
Mhm.
There's a future operational cash flow that can come from leases. That's how we think of commercial real estate.
And I love like your piece on like the time value of money. I think
Yes.
I really like that. Is so the way you explained it was so clear and concise, and it was basically that you want your dollar today, you want to make that dollar worth more tomorrow almost.
Yes, yeah.
So really, like land acquisition, it may cost this right now, but how are you making it more valuable tomorrow? And that takes some time. So a lot of folks, one of my clients at one point said, time is the killer of all deals. And I love that because it really, there's so many people, so many cooks in the kitchen that have to get these things to, to work together. I mean, that's why you're always like, come on, let's go.
Yes. Let's not sit on this thing forever.
So speaking of that, we get the stages.
Yes. So stages, if I could boil it down and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, I always think of 3 stages for myself. I think of the construction / land, right? There's no cash coming. That's just sort of hanging out there. And maybe it's in process of being, made to be cash flowing, but right now there's nothing.
And there's a lot to do with the dirt first.
So much to do with the dirt, so much entitlement work and pre-dev work. You're going to hear these terms. That's just what we say.
Yep. Pre-dev is a good one. Yeah.
So that's number 1. Number 2 is bridge, where it's a bridge stage, meaning there's a building there that could cash flow. It's done. It doesn't need construction work, but for something that needs to happen to it, maybe structural or renovations, or it's tired. We talked about Class C office buildings. So you have bridge, and then you have stabilized, which is what we all
and bridge. And like, I would say also, like, you hear the terms lease up, lease up or transitional.
Transitional.
Where the expectation is that it's not yet at its potential. So whatever you have to do to get it to its potential, potential is stabilization. So when you hear a stabilized asset, that is something that is already meeting its potential, I guess. And you could take it back a phase, right? You could just say,
That's a really good point.
You know what?
That's a really good
This
point.
is a stabilized asset, and I'm going to buy it because it's got, decent cash flow. But I envision this producing even more based on what I see it could be utilized for. You take it back to that kind of, and that is really only one stage back, right? Because then you're more in that development stage, the development or the construction or, whatever. And then you're kind of, but that is important for folks to understand financing for as well. And that whoever's providing the capital understands your plan, right? Because yes, it's worth this right now, but I'm going to take it down, and you got to be okay with that. So can I get some leeway on, my debt payments? Maybe they go interest only for a year during that period. So we can get into that, but I think that covers at least the
So for
basics.
someone, from a primer standpoint, when we say take it back a stage, we're talking about letting the leases expire and tenants move out, or buying tenants out. Actually saying, hey, please leave. You've got, and now again, when we think of this, a lot of people will say, you're kicking your tenants out? That's just terrible. This is about the evolution of commercial real estate.
And how they kick people out.
Yes, and how are folks treated. And by the way, in a lot of cases, it's a win-win. Maybe the tenant still has 6 years left in their lease. I'm just using an example, 6 years left, but because of COVID, many of their employees are now work from home, and they don't need all that space. So when the landlord, the owner of the building, comes and says, hey, do you want to talk about whether or not you need this space? You've got 10,000 square feet. And the tenant says, actually, I only need 3. I need 3. Will you buy back the other 7,000? That's a win-win situation where the owner may, this is great. I can unlock that space and make that space different because it's tired and it's old and it needs some love.
Yeah. And maybe they use that buyout, depending on the buyout money, that's a liquidity event, to, pre-fund the debt service payments during that time. Or, there's just, there's creative ways to make something work. It's the transparency in which you share that plan with your partners, because that's really, everybody's got to kind of, and you don't want to like get into the, give away your secrets or your secret sauce or whatever, but there is a part of it that you have to kind of convince people that this is going to work and why. So,
and trust your partners.
Yes.
Trust all the capital sources in particular. We're perfect timing. Look at this, Allie. No, we're doing really well.
Okay.
I'm just like, perfect. No.
I can get going.
We're doing so, no, I'm actually really
you said with Bob, you're like, and people, when you get into real estate, like we could be talking all day. I mean, we get really into it.
so we're trying to keep it as teachable as we can, but we're going to shift. Let's shift into credit and credit considerations. And I'll do a little primer for everyone here. We are not talking about any specific organization. We're not talking about any specific type of lender or mortgage provider. You can go, if you're a borrower, hear me out. You can go to a credit union. You can go to a bank. You can go to a private family to request a loan. You can go to a debt fund. You can go to so many different places to receive credit, whether it's from a public entity or a private entity. So we're agnostic, but each of those places that you go is going to have different terms and conditions. You're going to hear terms and conditions, and they're all going to have their own fees and pricing. We're going to talk at a very high level about some of those items. Not saying how much Allie is going to do a loan for you for. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying instead is, here's some of the things when you walk in that door, you have to be aware of, and it's going to play differently. This is the most important thing. It's going to play differently in different organizations. Every organization has their ear to the ground. Every organization is working with a market that changes every single day. So one of the biggest frustrations we find when we're working with someone who is seeking capital is, but you told me 6 months ago it looks like this, and now it looks like that. That's because the market moves in real time in commercial real estate capital. And there is no sheet that can summarize that, because every player is slightly different. So use that frame of reference as we talk about this. Allie is going to give you her context, which is broad, because you've been in banking, and so her context is really broad, but I want you to just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Thank you. I think, when you think of a lender, right, a provider of capital, they're going to ask you probably a lot of questions. And I think instinct is to say, well, why don't you trust me? This is what I do for a living, well, vice versa. But really, I mean, the customer's always right. So, I think, one of the things that I can say simply is that someone who's providing capital and they are going to have a first mortgage, or they're going to be given that mortgage, first mortgage, because that's what we're talking about, first position, which basically means that if the loan is in default, that then the bank or whoever holds that mortgage is going to be the owner of that property. So I think what I say to people is, I'm asking a lot of questions, but it's because I don't want to own your real estate. I don't want it. Like I'm not an owner, an operator, or a manager of commercial real estate. I want you to succeed. I want this project to never come to that point. Right. And so then it really gets into, okay, well, there are structural components of a loan that someone, my borrower, is going to feel like whatever's going to help them sleep at night, right? There's that component. There's that, I'm going to, I know that you say that rates are going to come down, but I'm going to fix my rate right now because I need to sleep at night and know exactly what my payments are going to be every month. I can't deal with this, it's going to go up or down or how, so that it could be the market is saying, ooh, you should really keep it floating, whatever, but that that customer
That
cannot sleep at
personal.
night without that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that person has to really consider, how do I get out of it if I want to go and refinance, or I want to take advantage of lower rates? So these are all things that, you have to communicate to with your capital provider, what's important to you. Right. So let me just go through some of the, and we could spend a really long time on this, but
we could spend a whole
okay, right. So I'm going to do what I did first. And if you don't mind, I have a lot of thoughts, and I found that writing it down was really important for me in order to not be overwhelmed. And hopefully, if you see me reading, it's because I really spent some time trying to organize my thoughts. And
She made the most beautiful outline, everyone. Literally,
it's really
pretty.
good.
It's gorgeous.
It is good. I read it. I was like, oh, this is good work. Who did
Like,
this?
so
No.
who did this? This is fabulous.
Yeah. So, all right. So you get the loan amount, right? And that's determined based on what we're going to get into. And really, I want to link the loan, that dollar amount, to the collateral, right? Because when you think of like an operating company, unless it's like a term loan or like a car loan, like you're going to buy something that has, you're going to have that 5-year car loan, and then it's going to be gone, and that the collateral is that car, right? But if you have an operating company, the way in which the way in which you get comfortable with them repaying you is based on how well they're running their business.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you look at, and that's where you get into owner occupied. They may need a building, but even if they have a lease between but they own both the real estate and the company, you really got to make sure that company is able to pay their
and this
right.
This is the key difference between residential and commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who jump into real estate and say, I'm going to be in real estate now. I'm going to do fix and flips. I'm just going to use this as an example. So I'm going to buy real estate properties. I'm going to fix them up slightly, and I'm going to sell them for more than I fixed them. I fixed them up for. I'm going to make my profit that way, and I'm going to rinse and repeat. And I'm going to keep doing that process. That is very different from commercial real estate. Commercial real estate, the lenders here can give really great capital because there's cash flow at the building. Because you're not waiting for some buyer to show up to buy your property. There are tenants in there, and the tenants are paying, effectively, they're paying you, the landlord, in order for you to pay the debt. We call it debt service. It's your mortgage payment. Yep. Pay the debt service on that loan.
Yeah. So we get the loan amount really, really tied to that, to the collateral. And then we have sources and uses of the funds. So when someone asks you, what are the sources and uses? The sources are the combination of what's going to be paying for all of the work, the uses. All right. So it has to tie out exactly. So if you have a loan amount, all right, and then whatever the cost is you're only going to get a loan amount. You're not going to get a loan amount for 100% of those costs, right? You're going to get a loan amount at a certain percentage of those costs. You have to fill in the rest.
Yes.
How you do that is there's lots of creative ways to do that, but that's the borrower equity. So the financing sources plus the borrower equity that total has to match the total cost for the project. And really what that does is that makes sure that you're using the funds the way that you say you're going to, that it's not that money that you're getting isn't going to go to a different project. It's going to the one that we're financing that we could possibly own at some point that we don't want to. So that's why that's important.
Can I add a simple example?
Please.
So the simplest example, this is the example I use. I just say $1 million because it's nice and round. So let's say you want to buy this property and it's stabilized, it has cash flow, and you want to buy it for $1 million, or the purchase price is $1 million. So you might want to buy it for $900,000. But let's say the purchase price is $1 million. You're not doing any work to it, just no work. You're just buying the building as is, and it's going to cash flow. When you go to a debt provider, you go to a lender, a first mortgage provider, they're going to say, we are willing to give you X percent. And I know we're going to talk more about this in the loan to value, but that's when Allie says it's $1 million, but you're going to put some equity in and some debt. So maybe you're going to only get $700,000 you
Right.
still have to come up with
That 300.
300,000,
Mhm.
which is also very similar to the residential market. Residential market, as we all know, in order to avoid paying PMI, you have to put down at least 20%
Yep.
of typically cash. Now, in commercial real estate, it can be very creatively structured. That's the difference with the residential and the commercial space.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get the borrower and the ownership. We're asking you questions. Who owns and generally for investment real estate folks, they're going to be creating a single purpose LLC that is going to own, it's going to have the asset is basically their balance sheet is going to show the real estate and all the furniture and fixing, whatever's in it.
But it's not personally, they're not buying it themselves as a human.
No, they're not.
Their entity is buying the real estate.
Yes. And that is a whole, I'm not an attorney, but they will advise you. It's just what I see most. Okay. I don't really see people putting it in their own names. Not anymore. What if Brooke's my tenant and you fell in my house and there's liability there. So there's that. And the other reason why we really want to know about the ownership and the borrowing structure is because when we think about someone owning it, right? How invested are they in it? Right? Do they care about Rochester, New York? I mean, that to say it simply, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with out of town investors. That is right. This is agnostic.
We don't care.
Something that I think
do you
about,
like this
right?
city and are you going to stick around and
Because that could determine how we structure the loan, right? Is what happens? Have they that 300,000, did they dip out of their own pocketbook for that? Or did they raise that capital or did they borrow that? Like, how did that 300,000, who really put that up? Because that if you dipped into your own pocket and you took out that 300,000, you're going to bet your butt that you are not letting that property fail, right? Because you have that
vested interest
in it. Yes, exactly. So then we get you'll probably hear primary and secondary sources of repayment. So a primary source of repayment for commercial real estate is going to be the leases that are in place. We talked about that. A secondary source of repayment is generally going to be liquidation of the asset. So a sale of it, right? Or a disposition. You may hear that.
And I love that we're defining this because you're gonna, when you talk about commercial real estate, people will talk about their acquisitions team and their disposition team. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, acquisition is the
people
who are buying it, and the disposition are the people who are selling it. That's it. But we like our fancy terms.
Yes. And obviously the goal is to have your acquisition and your disposition teams know what's going on with each other so that you're going to dispose of the asset for more than you acquired it.
The acquisition team bought it for.
Yeah. So the other secondary source of repayment would be if this building goes vacant and who's going to cover it. We want there could be guarantors involved, right? Personal guarantees or corporate guarantees, which is another topic that is very sensitive to a lot of people. And you got to respect that when you talk about guarantees. It is very personal because you're saying that if this doesn't work out, then
this property doesn't work out. We can basically pierce the LLC in effect. So the LLC exists and it's just the property, but we want you personally, owner, or some other entity that has cash flow and value to step in and pay this loan off if we have issues.
Well, guarantees is my next point, my next topic here. Because basically the big picture, right, is that you're providing additional security, right? That if something, if the cash flow is not there or the debt's not being paid or the principal, the loan, that you will step in because the guarantors, you may not be the only owner in this LLC, So, that's very personal.
Can I share a story?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so Allie and I have been in commercial real estate finance for a long time, and I'm sharing this because this was from our side of the table. This was a very eye-opening moment for me about the sensitivity of guarantees, right?
Yeah.
So you and I, when someone says, if you do this wrong, I want to come to you and make you take care of it. Human nature is, wait, what do you mean? Wait, what do you mean?
You don't trust me?
You don't trust me? You don't think I can? So one of the hardest jobs for us is to be able to have that conversation in a very sympathetic, empathetic, but logical manner, which ties back to the collateral often, right?
Yeah.
So if you show up and say, I want a land loan and there is no cash flow, you logically have to then say to yourself, so what is this lender going to look for in order to make that loan to me?
Yeah.
They're going to often look to you to be supportive in some way.
Or construction. You know, I mean, there's different types of guarantees, right? So when someone talks about guarantees, you really you need to go and make sure that your attorney is working with you to understand the different types, right? So, but when I say construction, you may hear a construction guarantee. Well, think back to the lender does not want to own or operate or construct this building. So I don't want to find a construction company to finish the work. I don't want to, you know,
I don't know how to do
that.
In the lender's
Yeah.
space.
So, you know, it could be that the lender is asking for a construction completion guarantee, not just to ensure that the construction is completed, but that if there are, you know, what if the budget doesn't cover it?
Yes.
You know, like who's gonna take care of the extra money that's gonna take to complete the construction? And if the loan is in default, then the bank would have to do that. So we then, you know, the lender may go to you personally to say, if this doesn't work out, or if your construction company just bails, right? Like, can you make sure that you complete the project? Because I really don't want to do that.
And I think the biggest takeaway we want everyone to, especially with construction, land, bridge, anything that's transitional where the cash flow isn't there. The biggest takeaway is it is the job of the capital provider to thread the needle through all of these different what if scenarios.
Yes.
And so they're doing it logically. They're not doing it in a way at all that's intended to offend or other, you know, like we believe that you know what you're doing, and yes, you're going to sort this out, but it is in the capital provider. So think of yourself, if you are offering money to somebody else, what are some of the things you might ask for as assurances to help make sure that that money is going to come back to you at some point? Because maybe you're offering money to someone who's going to build something you yourself could never build. So how do you make sure that the money flows in your direction without you having to step in and take that thing over, because you wouldn't know what to do with it? So there's a lot of dispassionate conversations.
We might know what to do with it, but we haven't planned for it.
We don't have the teams. We've seen it before, but you don't have the teams or the resources allocated to be able to do the building in the way that the owner does. And so a lot of these conversations we're trying to make as dispassionate as possible while being empathetic. Right. That's the role of the person who's trying to help you, is the capital provider. But it's a very fine line, and we're really working through that.
Yeah. And then you really get the type of loan that you're going to have. So that's going to be, you know, the permanent, mortgage loan is going to be on that, generally that stabilized asset, right? It's already cash flowing. And then you'll on those transit or the construction ones where you have a plan in place, you got plans and specs, you got all the municipal approvals, you are ready to go. You've done, your pre-development. So then a construction loan is going to give you that ability to have the loan. Think of it like, I guess, a line of credit.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. So you get the construction line of credit, and then you advance, because you don't want to start paying interest on the whole thing at first. You don't need the whole thing at first. It's going to take time. So how long is the construction going to take is generally where you want to match up that construction term. So generally 2-3 years, sometimes, depending on the complexity, 12 months, and then is it leased? Do you have pre-leasing? You know,
Mhm.
is the tenant ready to move in after you're done with that construction?
Signed and like
Signed,
contract
sealed,
in place.
delivered.
Yeah.
You know, and who's paying for what? The tenant improvements, TI is another term you're going to hear, or TIC, tenant improvement costs.
Mhm.
And so essentially that's going to be a time period that the bank is going to, or the lender is going to try to match up with the time it takes for you to actually do the construction and the time it's going to take to get to stabilization.
Mhm.
Because once you have made that property that, and maybe and stabilization is defined really in your, really defined in your appraisal,
Mhm.
which says what does stabilization mean at this property.
Mhm.
So generally you're going to hear for multifamily, you're going to say stabilization is 97, 90, usually 97% occupied.
Mhm.
All right. But for office, it could be 90% occupied and stable. Like what is the real potential
in that location?
in
and
that
market.
location? So it's
Yeah.
not, I'm throwing it out here,
Yes.
but there's cases to be made for why something should be a different stabilized occupancy, but that's what you're going to hear. And that's really when you want that to convert to perm.
Yes.
And start amortizing. And I want to say this because I think there's confusion. I've heard it a lot of a term of a loan. Someone calling you? They're so excited to hear what we have to say that they just want to. Hold on, we're going to answer it.
We're going to answer and hang up. That is. Give us. Oh, there we go. We're back.
All right, we're back. Wow, was that intermission?
That was
like
intermission.
Forced intermission. Okay, where were we?
You were talking about construction financing.
Yeah.
And getting the stabilization. We just covered that.
Yes, we did. Okay, so I guess what
we totally knocked ourselves off.
Oh my god, I was like really interested in who that was too.
Sorry.
So okay, and then fees is another hot topic, right? And that can get personal too. I think that every lender has kind of their secret sauce of like the ways in which they maneuver through these major topics, but this is essentially what you're going to hear. And when people say recourse, that's generally the guarantee that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I just want to, if I have time,
yes.
I just want to kind of get in a little bit more in the nitty gritty in terms of some of these things that you're going to hear. So when we talk about the loan, it's secured by the first mortgage and generally always the assignment of the rents and leases at the property. So, think back again, if the lender ever had to take over this property, they'd want to make sure that they could step in as the landlord.
Yes.
Right. So, and generally there's going to be, you'll hear the term SNDA. I mean, there's ways in which all of this can be structured, but I just want to say, think back, if the lender is going to have to go take over that property, they have to be able to manage, operate, because it could be an assignment. If the management, it could be assignment of the management contract, they want to make sure that they're able to have the fluidity of transfer of ownership from hopefully not the borrower, but to the lender is they want that to be as least disruptive as possible. And so that they want to be in control, really. So, then the loan amount, we talked about the sources and uses. This is a hot topic too of, how much is it going to cost, right? So you'll hear loan to cost, and the cost could be the cost to purchase it for an acquisition, or it could be the cost to build.
It could be the cost to purchase the land, all of the interest that's required, because occasionally a lender will require reserves for interest, and all of the costs to construct, which are going to be grouped in different ways. So you really are, when we say cost, we're talking about the full budget to do everything during the term of that loan, and maybe even beyond a little bit. We're talking
it's not just construction costs. It's
there's lease up. If you have to carry the property for a little while, there may be reserves required for that as well.
Yeah. And there's like a specific example that I have that I was thinking of for that. So And then you're going to get LTV, loan to value. And this is very simply the dollar amount of the loan divided by the value of the property. And that value is determined, generally you're going to have an estimate, right? But you're going to need a third party appraisal for that. That would be a really good topic too, to have an appraiser conversation. But yeah. And so you're going to hear, when you hear of a loan to value, you're going to hear loan to a stabilized value. We talked about that. Loan to an as complete. So that would be, let's just say it's completed. All right. So there's a whole bunch of money that goes into that, right? But it's not stabilized yet. Yeah. So the loan to as complete could be different, or it could be the same. Yeah. Because if there's pre-leasing and the project's complete and the tenant's in, then it's stabilized upon completion. But there could be a difference in those two.
And this is where I think the technical definition gets interesting for borrowers in particular, who are like, well, hold on a second, how are you defining it? And what should we be paying attention to? Because there are, when someone says loan to value, you'll often hear what value, which value are we talking about, and making sure that you're really clear on, because when you think about it, a completed building is great, but a completed empty building is not as great.
But it is worth more than the land itself. So that's where the as is. So what is the value of what you're buying, like right
now, the dirt.
Okay.
It's just the dirt.
Yes, exactly. And it could be that your acquisition is essentially the value, whatever you paid for it is essentially what it's worth. That could be it. Or what happens if you've owned it for like 50 years, this land, and now you have an idea and you want to put something on it. The lender's generally not going to give you credit for all the carrying cost over the years that you've put into it. That was your choice. But what will likely happen is that then the lender will look to the appraiser to say, okay, you tell us what it's worth, because it could be the cost could equal the as is value or not. So it's very easy for folks to throw around terms and then just apply apples to apples comparisons. And there are nuances and there are these stages. Everything that we're talking about today could change, how your loan is structured.
And it's going to absolutely, the asset class, the asset stage are going to change the loan to value offered, the loan to cost offered. They're going to change pricing and fees. It's going to change conditions. So when someone says, please give me all of the options, you realize that it's very difficult to collapse it. It can be. You can do your best to collapse it down into, well, if you're going to build the multifamily building and right now it's raw land, and you can kind of come up with an idea, but most of this happens in conjunction with others who are in the real estate capital space, and you together are forming an opinion of where the market is today. And everyone has little bits of data and information from where the Fed is moving rates, right, to what unemployment is, to what's happening in the world, to that specific location, right? What does that location look like? What are you trying to do? What's your plan? So it's very hard. It's very hard to sit with a friend who has another building that's different from yours and say, wait, why was your interest rate that and my interest rate was this? Because there's so many factors that feed into.
Oh, interest rate. I can't believe, what the heck? I added that to this. Oh my gosh.
It's okay.
Wow, what a whiff.
So I think we can summarize interest rate by saying that the reason you go to a lender who's offering you a first mortgage or a deed of trust loan is because it's the cheapest form.
It's the cheapest
form. But what is cheap? What is cheap when interest rates are moving all over the place? That's market determined. It's not determined by the lender who says, I put my thumb out and say, today the wind is blowing this way and therefore the rate will be that. It's actually done in a real-time manner at every different organization. They determine based on market.
And based on their own balance sheet and their own strategy. I mean, they also have to come up with the capital, or if they provide a certain amount, I mean, there's a real regulatory burden on a lot of these, mostly banks. Just put that right out there.
Whereas the private lenders have more flexibility, but because they may be there when others are shut down, their demand spikes. And when their demand spikes, they can charge higher, right? Supply demand, they can charge higher rate because they have a higher demand for their product. So the market dynamic, I think one of the key takeaways for us to offer to everyone is get yourself a friend like Allie, a really great friend like Allie, you know, and or me too. You're the professor. I'm just the ride along. Get yourself a friend who understands this space well. The brokerage community can be very helpful. Loan brokers, you know, folks who help connect capital to borrowers, they can be incredibly helpful as well. But you need to be unabashedly asking questions and not be shy about what your plans are for an asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned about the interest rates. I mean, the term. That's what I was going to say about the term now. Okay, so the term, and we're running out of time here. So I just want to say this: that there is confusion about the term of a loan. Right. So generally, if you go and get your own house mortgage, you're going to get a 30-year term, and your payments are based on an amortization of fixed principal and interest. Right? They combine it and they write at closing,
here's your payment for the next 30 years.
For the next 30 years. Exactly. Generally, when you're going to a commercial lender or you're financing commercial real estate, those are not going to be they're not going to be equal. So generally what will happen is, and this is very general, this is nobody's secret sauce, but if you have a multifamily property, you're probably going to get a term anywhere between, and I'm just throwing this out here, you know, you could be quoted from a lender a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year term, 7-year in there, right? 3, 5, 7, 10-year terms, right? That's the term that they promise to lend to you. That's all they're saying is, but your payment is likely going to be based on an amortization of 30 years. So you just have to understand that when you're going to a lender that is going to be doing commercial real estate, you are likely not going to have a term that matches the promise to pay term is not going to match the way your payment is. And that's really what the big point there.
There are, and we're going to be speaking at some point soon, we're going to be speaking with someone who understands the agency space and is like very, very keen into the agency space. And in that space, you may find longer terms. You're going to find no recourse
except for the bad boy carve out,
but those agencies do not like necessarily, not all of them, but they like stabilize. They're not really excited about construction projects. Whereas you'll find in the bank space, the alternative lender space, the private credit space, you'll find more appetite. They say appetite for construction lending or other bridge lending. So we are slightly over. We thank everybody for joining us today. Allie, it is always such a pleasure.
We love this.
Even though we got a phone call, right? I have no idea what happened there. Literally, I'm in my 40s.
I'll call him back.
I don't know what happened.
Brooke's phone.
I gotta figure that out.
Thank
you everyone for joining us. Oh my, thank you. And we will see you all again for another live talking about more commercial real estate finance and commercial real estate in general topics. If you like this type of primer, please don't be shy sending me comments, adding comments to LinkedIn. Don't be shy putting comments on YouTube. This video will also be on YouTube. You can always reach out to me at LegaSHE.com, LegaSHE.com. All my information is there. So I really, really love your support and love your feedback. Allie and I love your support.
Covenants. I forgot about covenants.
Oh my God, I forgot. We'll have to do that other day. We'll do that other day.
I'll write you a paper. How about that?
and actually, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these amazing notes and thoughts that Allie has blessed us with from all of her years of experience, and we'll create something on the website so that folks can download and have a reference for themselves. And this is in honor, again, of free education for all. We're really trying to reach underrepresented individuals to help them through their learning journey on commercial real estate topics, mindset, and what it takes to be in this space. That is what I am here for. And I hope that this is of value. Oh, I know I'm bowing down to you, the professor. Hope this is of value to everyone. Please continue to follow along on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and at the website, LegaSHE.com. Thank you, everyone. Bye.